If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, hikers, campers, and people who explore forests/deep woods, what is your most scary, unnerving thing or otherworldly creature encounter? My family and I have lived in the same house for about 15 years, and I've always had a bad feeling about our guest room. It's a pretty standard room. It has windows, a bathroom, and a little closet for storage purposes. My boyfriend was staying in the guest room and told me the next morning he saw something weird. Now my boyfriend is really aware when it comes to the paranormal and can often feel presences that no one else can. He told me that he woke up with a weird feeling and noticed the closet door was a little open. He then saw a creature crawling on all fours coming out of the closet. It was dark, had no hair, and seemed to me to be male. He just always warns me to not go near the closet because it's bad. Has anyone ever experienced something like this, or can anyone give advice on what to do? When I was in 6th grade, I lived in a small town in northern Iowa. There was one little forested area just outside of town. My friends and I all lived in a trailer park that was attached to the forest. We decided to go into the woods one night and duck around. We were in there for around 4 hours when it happened. We were in the dead center of the woods, not having a care in the world. We were just standing and talking at this point. I heard footsteps and crushing leaves behind me, so I turned around and saw a figure standing there, just staring at me. My friends asked me what I was looking at because they didn't see what I saw. I told them that there was someone there, and then I realized that it didn't want to be seen. That is why I was the only one who saw it. It ran away when it noticed me staring back at it. My friends heard the footsteps retreating from the area. We had decided to quietly and slowly walk out of the woods without encountering anything else that could be potentially dangerous. That did not save us from the terrifying sound that emanated from the general that it ran toward. It was a loud shrieking sound that closely resembled that of a hand moving up and down the strings of a piano, but it had a rusty and coarse sound added to it. We got the hell out of there as fast as we possibly could. We all decided not to stop and talk, we just kept on running to our own trailers. We never spoke of it after it occurred. 7 years ago, my cat was found under an uprooted tree near my house, mangled. 5 years ago, I must have been having an episode. I have mental issues, schizophrenia for one, and I stumbled through the woods near my house alone at midnight or sometime like that. I didn't have much with me. Just a flashlight and a rather large knife. I'm a strong believer in the paranormal. My whole family is. I remember saying to myself that I was going to find out what killed my cat. That must have been why I went out. Anyhow, I went through the woods and found a dark patch. In this area, I stopped to rest and started hearing laughter. Not loud laughter, but more of a chuckle, coming from the darkest part. Thinking it was just my mind or a hunter, I didn't notice entirely, so I stayed put. Soon I vaguely saw the skull of a goat facing me on the body of a human, or something of the like, black as the abyssal night. I shined my flashlight on it, and it hid. I started running back and saw it in front of me, so I tried to cut at it with the knife, but it slashed my hand open, and I dropped the knife. I made it into my house and bandaged the gash on my hand as best I could. I went into my office to sit and get calm, but looking outside the window, I saw the creature coaxing me to come out. I went into my bedroom and crammed myself into the closet, shut the door, and waited. An hour or so passed, and the creature was gone. I called 911, and I eventually got medical attention for my hand and needed stitches. I told some people about what had happened, and what I got back was a mix of different stories, and a few people said there could have been a cult meeting on my property, and that was one of the cultists. Quite a few people told me it was a wild animal, and I thought I saw more than what was actually there. Most of what I had in response was in relation to a cryptid called the Wendigo, which is essentially a human crazed by cannibalism, but there's a bit more to it. I'm open to believing any of these, and I'm also open to your suggestions. Whatever it is, I have nightmares about it sometimes, and it's not uncommon for me to have sleep paralysis. I think I see it sometimes, watching me from the woods, but I can't tell if it's real or just me. About 5 years ago, when I was 14, my best friend and I, both went for a walk on a hiking route in our village that we knew existed but never went there, so we didn't know how long the hike would take. About halfway through, it started to get dark outside. The route was a road through the woods that had no street lights whatsoever, so we called our friend, M, who had a crosser bike, to come so we wouldn't be alone. He came, and we continued our walk in complete darkness. He turned off the bike because it was loud and pushed it, but we didn't use our flashlights because the moonlight illuminated our path. As we were walking and talking, I heard something about 20 feet away in the woods that sounded like a loud scream through crying. I immediately stopped and looked at my friends because I thought I was the only one who heard it, but their terrified looks told me they heard it too. The two of them jumped on the bike, and I ran after them to the first street light. Yeah, I know, they left me behind. We were panicking and trying to find an explanation for that sound, maybe some kind of animal, until I remembered a story of Drekovic. I live in the Balkans, and I don't think the name has a translation, but I would call it maybe a howler or a screamer. Basically, it is a mythology creature characteristic of the Balkans, and there are probably 20 different beliefs about what it is. I told my friends a story of what I heard a Drekovic is, and it was the soul of a baby that died unbaptized. This is the only paranormal thing that happened to me, and to this day I get goosebumps when telling the story to someone because I remember it like it happened yesterday. I lived in southeast Kansas, right on the Oklahoma border, and just recently left. But one night, I was outside with my dog. It was winter, it was late, and it was cold. I was looking across the yards, small rural neighborhood, big yards, to this old abandoned house that was bordered by fields on one side and woods on the other two sides. The front yard facing the street had a light post. I always looked at this house when I went outside, or even when I went to the bathroom at night, because I could see it through the window, and it always gave me a weird vibe. So it was an old house, the bottom of the windows were probably 3 or 4 feet off the ground. I'm standing there, and I see this tall, black, thin, vaguely human-shaped figure glide through the yard, coming from the woods. And I say glide because it didn't have feet and wasn't walking like a human. My dog, who barked at its own shadow, also saw it and went totally silent and tucked its tail. The thing reached the top of the windows, which were probably 10 feet behind it. It was probably 50 yards from me. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not sure how tall it would actually be, but it definitely seemed taller than a regular guy. I just got this overwhelming feeling that it'd be bad news if it noticed me seeing it, but I was frozen and didn't want to make a sound. It crossed the yard into the field. I never saw it again. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. I have no idea what it could have been. I've driven through the Oklahoma/Arkansas Ozarks a couple times and have always had really weird experiences there. It's definitely a strange place. I grew up in southeast Oklahoma, in Cole County. The noises you described remind me of the noises I heard. My folks would call it haddock woohoo, meaning man and the noise it makes. Haddock means male in Choctaw. Sometimes I would hear chattering and mumbling, like someone was imitating human speech, plus the noise of something moving within the trees and leaves. I never felt threatened by it, but I felt it wasn't just an animal. We hunted the land often, but I only saw it once. It was eating apples from our little orchard. It looked like a tall and lean person but was covered in long, reddish-brown fur. The skin was a dark gray color. The face looked very human, but the features reminded me of the illustrations of early humans. I was stunned when I saw it. I thought it was a family member dressed as an ape until I realized how big it was. It saw me and slowly walked back into the woods. I looked for tracks later and didn't find anything unusual at all. Most animals leave evidence behind, like fur, tracks, poop, or musks. But I didn't find anything at all. It doesn't make sense. So one day, I went for a little walk with my dog. When I decided to walk through the graveyard, it looked so pretty and peaceful, so I thought, why not? Anyway, I was walking, minding my own business, when my dog started growling and barking at nothing. There was no one around, no wind, no noise, or nothing. She was growling in the dark, creepy woods next to the graveyard. That wood is massive and so dark, so much shit goes off in there, drug dealing, hookups, all sorts of crazy stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a murder or a body found there. Every time I walk past that wood or go near it, I get a cold, eerie feeling as if something is watching me. My mom feels the same. I sometimes see a dark figure in the corner of my eye when walking past. My mom has also seen that too. After going by the wood or in it, I will have a nightmare about the dark figure in the woods. Once, I was a bit away from the woods, and I heard a strange hovering, vibrating sound and a strange woman's voice. I couldn't quite make out what she was saying, but it sounded like a robot. I have no clue what is even in them, paranormal, killers, druggies, aliens? Kids messing about, Ike. What's your opinion? My mother and I currently reside in Western Oregon. She is very outdoorsy, so when I went to see her over the summer, we decided to drive the hour to the coast from her city. We were the only campers at this free campsite at the Forest Hill, which is a sizable foothill of the coastal mountains and can be reached by car in about 25 minutes. We decided to unwind for the rest of the day as soon as we arrived at our destination. In the middle of the night, I heard my mother gasp and was startled to see her sitting up straight in the tent. She put her hand over my mouth as soon as she realized I was awake because I was beginning to ask her what was wrong. We suddenly heard footsteps right next to our tent, while it was completely silent. The small flap over the zipper was also moving. Then, we saw a silhouette, a few of them. We knew they were not humans because they started making growling noises like animals. We heard the leaves rustle and the branches twitch and break as they crawled around our camp. What are they? A few silhouettes look like humans, but they growl like animals. My mom told me to keep my voice down as I panicked. Finally, the footsteps stopped. We had a hard time sleeping back in our tent but managed to. Then, suddenly, I woke up to someone humming, and I looked at my mom. She was sleeping peacefully beside me. Humming in the woods? To my horror, against the fireplace, I could see a female figure standing facing our tent. She stood there for a solid 5 to 10 minutes, just looking at our tent. Then I heard her softly laughing in her deep, creepy voice. My goosebumps rose, and I shook my mom to wake up. I told her what I saw outside the tent, and my mom opened the tent and checked. Nothing was harmed or lost. The woman disappeared in thin air without making any noise. How is that even possible? Then the next day, without any hesitation, we packed our bags and left the forest. One of the forest rangers told us that this forest had someone called the Guardian, Penunggu in Malay, and many have experienced her presence there. What got me bad was the humming and her laugh in the middle of the night. It was October 2012, and me and my grandfather were hunting for white-tailed deer on his property in a little run-down town called Reedy, West Virginia. We were not having any luck at the first few spots, so we moved to a different location down towards the bottom of his property. This place always gave me the creeps because everything down there seemed to be dead, the trees, grass, and there was basically no wildlife in this area. Well, after us sitting there for about 30 to 40 minutes without seeing anything, we were about to move. That's when I saw it. There was this very odd-looking creature that kind of looked like a horse with a wolf face, with this very ruffled and decayed look to its fur and skin. It was just walking through the field we were watching over when it stepped right over the fence. Keep in mind that this fence was made to keep horses in, so this thing was quite big, at least bigger than anything that should have been in those woods. My grandfather is dead now, so I am the last person to have physically seen this thing, so if any of you have any idea what this could have been, that would be very appreciated. Holy SHT, I'm freaking out. So my friend and I are both huge into hauntings and stuff, so we decided to go to the haunted forest on the edge of the town we live in. There's a huge backstory behind it, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think it does. I'm just freaked out right now. So we went there and started just messing with stuff like the old cement archways, the gates of hell, and then it started to get real. The path we went down was ending and getting grown over by trees, and it sounded like kids were playing in the stream. When the path was totally overgrown, we just turned to head back. The kids were starting to get creepy, but then it felt just weird, like someone was there, but we couldn't see anybody. Until we got back to the car, and there were handprints on the windows. It looked like somebody was looking into his car, leaning on the slightly cracked windows because it's the first night that's not hot as shit. It was all safe being in the open, not surrounded by trees and no little kids, but then it started to feel really dark, like it felt like the moon and stars just weren't there, even though they were. We got in the car and got the duck out of there, but once we started to calm down, all of the feelings just rushed back to me, the feeling of being followed in darkness. I can't shake it, even though we were downtown in the light with other people around us, it just felt dark and lonely. We're really freaked out that something followed us out of the woods, and we don't know what the duck to do. I just feel so nervous. I want to try and get some sleep, and I'm hoping it's just my nerves, but who the hell knows. I was on a camping trip with some friends when we decided to go a little further into the forest to get the best location at the river. We had some beers and went swimming. When it started to get dark, almost all of my friends wanted to go home. Only my buddies, Flo and Laura, stayed with me. We lit a fire and continued drinking beer. After some hours, I felt I had to go to the toilet. To be more accurate, I needed to take a shower. No problem, I even had toilet paper in my backpack. Our camp was located right by the river, and a big field of high grass separated us from the forest. I decided to go to the high grass right in front of the forest. So I grabbed my phone as a flashlight and the toilet paper and went in the direction of the forest. It was pitch black, and because of the branches of the trees, I could not even see into the forest with my flashlight. So I sat down with my back to the forest and started my business. I was about 160 feet away from my friends now and could not even hear them talking anymore. When I was almost finished, I heard a sound coming from behind me. It sounded like a rustle of dry leaves and the crackle of branches. I know it's kind of the horror movie stereotype. I stumbled, "Hello, who's there?" 2 or 3 times, but nobody answered. I thought it might be some kind of animal, so I screamed as loud as I could. But to my horror, this thing got even closer. I finished as fast as I could, which still felt like an hour to me while the sound came closer and closer every second. When I stood up and started running, this thing was so close that I expected it to grab me from behind as I tried to escape. So I ran as fast as I could, screaming and crying. When I arrived at our camp, I told my friends everything. They didn't really believe me, but they were pretty scared too. I was 17 at the time, big and muscular, and normally not the type of guy to cry. But this thing made me cry. And it would make me again. I could not sleep at all that night. I sat in my sleeping bag, the river to my back, while staring in the direction of the forest. There were no sounds or anything. Just the sound of the wind and darkness. In the morning, we packed our stuff and made our way home. I won't go anywhere near that forest anymore. Jokes were often made about me. But I know what I heard, and I get the shivers right now while writing this. I used to live in northern New Jersey, in a really wooded neighborhood near a large lake. It wasn't at all uncommon to see plenty of deer, foxes, raccoons, and other animals crossing the road while driving at night. One night when I was driving home, right as I'm rounding the corner on the road adjacent to the lake, I spot a small, dark animal-like creature about the size of a fox or cat sitting on the grass by the side of the road. Even in the light of my headlights, it was completely black and featureless, except for 3 or 4 points of light on various parts of its body, which were reflective like the eyes of a cat, but only one was where its head was. The weirdest part was that when it looked at me, it disappeared. Not like it ran away, but like it just blinked out of reality, leaving behind only an afterimage similar to the blobs of color you can see after looking directly at a bright light. I felt my heart drop in my chest and slammed on the brakes, but there was no sign of it aside from its floating silhouette fading in my retinas. And, just for a bit of background, I don't have a history of any sort of delusions or hallucinations, a bit of depression, or alcoholism in my youth, but I've never seen things like that. I'm not one of those folks who is always seeing ghosts and apparitions and sensing energy. I'm not even sure if I believe in that stuff even now. I just wanted to put this out there in case anyone has seen anything similar or has more insight. I am a 13-year-old boy who lives in a small town in a heavily wooded area of Pennsylvania. I have a fairly large group of friends, but mainly just me and my best friend have experienced these. The house I live in is over 200 years old, and it already has an old barn that used to be a slaughterhouse. We have over 364 acres of land. Me and my friend like to explore, so one day we went for a walk in the woods. We were both armed with pocket knives. But as we walked, we came across a gray creature slumped over a dead animal. It turned around to show strangely human features and then went on eating. We ran, and we still haven't gone in there on foot to this day. We agreed to ignore it until he had a party at his house. He doesn't have as much land as I do, but he lives only 2 mountains over. There were 4 of us there. We all went to explore an abandoned quarry. We found out it was now only a cow pasture, so we decided to head back. On the way down, about halfway, these pale creatures jumped down from the nearby rocks, moving quick and quiet. Until what we nicknamed the Big One screeched. It was inhuman, like a woman screaming mixed in with a wolf howl. Ever since, whenever we're all together, we hunt for them. We have discovered they dislike fire, so we have only one flare for emergencies. We keep a stockpile of flammable stuff. We should also arm ourselves to the teeth. I've never been good at telling stories, so usually I just say, "You'll know when you see one." But now I'm telling everybody. After doing some research on myths and legends, we believe that these things are the Native American legend of the Wendigo. This happened when I was about 6 or 7 years old, living in rural Florida, and has stuck with me ever since. For context of the lay of the land, I lived in a trailer on about half an acre of land in the middle of nowhere, on a dirt road. Behind our trailer was a bunch of wood that would go beyond the property line and was separated by a barbed wire fence. So now that the setting is established, my younger brother, older sister, and I would play at the corner of the property that faced the road and deeper into the woods. You can envision it as a giant square. We were there playing or doing whatever it was that we did back there, and I started walking back to the trailer along the fence that was next to the road. I turned around, and just beyond the fence where my brother and sister were, I saw the figure of a man sitting on a stump. It was darker back there due to the shade, but it was still daylight out, which made it very strange that it looked like a pitch-black silhouette. It was the side profile of the man, and in a moment, he leaned forward and seamlessly appeared to morph into a 4-legged creature about the size of a dog. I distinctly remember it appearing skinny or malnourished. It circled the stump about halfway, abruptly stopped, and snapped its neck in my direction, making eye contact. I was at least 30 yards away from whatever this was. It all happened so fast that all I could do was scream, run as loud as I could, and take off. I asked my brother and sister if they had seen what I saw, but they didn't. I've read or heard about a lot of weird beings or occurrences, but I have no idea what it was that I saw. It's 11:17 in rural New Brunswick, Canada, and I'm getting in my car to head back to Fredericton from my parents' place in the middle of nowhere. I had just finished up a small gig at a local fair, having had 1 or 2 beers at the show. So I'm just pulling out of my parents' driveway onto a dim country road going back to the city when I turn on my high beams to see a tall, lanky, completely black figure standing in the ditch on the right side of the road. I mean, this thing must have been 8 or 9 feet tall, absorbed all light, and had limbs no bigger around than a baguette. As soon as I saw it, it started to run up the ditch and across the road in a very fast, very strange, gliding kind of way. I slammed on the brakes and watched this thing run across the road and into a field on the other side of the road, towards some woods. I'm getting goosebumps writing this, but I could still see its silhouette speeding across the field in my neighbor's yard lights as it went into the black of the night. I stopped to shiver on the road for a moment before speeding up the road to a safe distance. I had no idea what I had just seen, so I called my mom to tell her I had just seen this tall, alien-looking creature less than 100 meters from their home. She and my sister searched online for what I had told them and came back with an article on the Black Stick Man phenomenon, which exactly fit what I had seen on this normal August night in New Brunswick. This experience has really opened my mind to the paranormal, so for that, I'm almost thankful. I was looking over my shoulder for a week, afraid to go out at night, and I still feel unnerved thinking about it. I haven't seen anything like it since, but I have had some experiences with spirits growing up in what my whole family agrees is a haunted home. A few years ago, I was out hunting with a friend when we lost legal light. So we hiked back to the truck and hit the road in his parents' new Ford half-ton, the ones with the sensors all over the vehicle. We had some music playing as we were just heading back towards town again, when the music started acting weird and cutting in and out with static, so me being in the passenger seat, I disconnected the Bluetooth and reconnected the phone. The music cleared up, and we continued down the road. We got up to the KM board on the road where my previous encounter took place, and I mentioned, "Oh, hey, that's the whistle block that we logged a couple years ago." Half jokingly because I couldn't make heads or tails of it. My friend replied, "Guri-iat, thanks for that," as I had told him the story before. We continued slowly driving down the road because it gets pretty rough in a couple spots and the road has a few sharp turns and an S-bend. Well, we go about a kilometer further, and the music starts screeching and doing what we can only describe as alien noises. So I disconnect the Bluetooth again, and my friend says, "Oh, Mom's got a cord in here." So he stops and gets the cord for me. I plug the phone in and play music again. Another kilometer down the road, and the phone goes ape, I mean, loud alien squealing that sounds similar to that SHT dial-up internet noise from the 90s. We had started into the S-bend when this was happening, and we shut the music off completely as we were driving still, making one half of the S-turn, and then we both looked up from the music deck or screen, and the headlight illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. So we swerve and take the ditch a bit, still going probably 30 kilometers per hour, and get the truck back up on the road. We continue coasting down the road, as we are both in awe after just seeing a flash of this thing. I finally say, after what seemed like 5 quiet minutes, "Man, did you just see?" My friend cuts me off and says, "A F-kin skeleton in the middle of the road?" I say, "Yeah, like a white rib cage, and a deer skull for a face?" He finishes. I said, "Turn around. What the FCK was that? Does someone need our help?" Not thinking that we are in the middle of nowhere, with no vehicles around or any that we had passed from other hunters. It was early season and no one bow hunts here anyways. My friend said, "I'm not turning around, I feel sick. I'm going to throw up." And he continued driving. We didn't see another vehicle until we hit the pavement again. It was taller than the pickup by easily a couple feet. I'm 6 feet 1 inch and my forehead is at the top of the window for reference. It is black surrounding the white of the bones, with long arms stretched to its sides as if it were saying, "Try and hit me." I watched this thing pass the passenger window and stared up at it as we wailed by it, and it was definitely 3-dimensional, tall with long arms, and dark. Dead looking. Like light was sucked into it without reflecting anything. It is hard to explain. When we hit service again, my friend received a text message from his mother saying, "What did you two idiots hit in my brand new truck?" I guess the new Ford send near accident reports to the owner when the sensors pick up something? I'm an old school Chevy guy, so I don't know. The only thing I can find online that resembles what we both saw is a Wendigo without the antlers. Or the headlights didn't illuminate them anyway. This happened about 2 years ago, The anniversary of it is actually coming up because it happened on my friend's birthday. The day started off with 4 of us hanging out. Let's call them J, B, and T. It was Jay's birthday. We all hung out at the local park, which had a large river running next to it and a local hiking trail running along the river. The hiking trail has a long history of being an old train railroad and all kinds of things. Anyway, around 9 p.m., B and T decided to go home and left me and Jay at the park. Me and Jay's idea was to camp out in the woods that were next to the park for the night since we had a secret camp spot there. I say secret loosely since all the neighborhood teens also camped out there and partied. Me and Jay began to set up camp there and attempted to start a fire, but since it had been raining the past few days, the wood was too wet to start. At that time, Jay got a call from B. He answered it, and at first, he had a weird look on his face. He then took the phone from his face and put the phone on speaker. "Can you both hear me?" B had said. We both said yes. We could also hear T in the background. Alright, well, me and T just saw something really weird. We asked him what he saw. It looked like a person running on all fours. I sat there, puzzled, and asked what was so weird about it. Because it was running across the river by your guys' campsite. We quickly packed up and left the campsite. Surely we thought maybe they were joking, but both B and T have never been known to lie. We decided to walk around the town for a few hours until we somehow ended up walking on the hiking trail that ran by the river. It was around 3 a.m. now. We were starting to come to a tight bend on the trail where you couldn't see that well in front of it. It was already night, and the trail was littered with trees on both sides. As we were turning the bend, we both heard a very odd noise. I'm still not exactly sure how to describe it. It was almost like a young lady crying, but also some type of wicked laugh at the same time. I don't even think that describes it. But as we fully came through the bend, the path turned straight. We both stopped in our tracks. Standing about 50 feet in front of us seemed to be what I can only describe as an elongated gray humanoid thing on all fours slowly crawling towards us. It had no hair anywhere on its body. We both quickly turned around, and I have never run so fast in my life. We didn't say a single word. We just ran the 2 miles back to my house. We rarely talk about it anymore, only that neither of us can describe the sound we heard that night or what we saw. Keep in mind that my friend is a hard skeptic of anything paranormal, supernatural, or anything related. This was really a long time ago when I was a kid. My mom put me and my brother to bed and went to her room. The door of my room is right in front of my bed, and I was looking into the hallway while laying in my bed when suddenly this small black creature that kind of looks like a mix of a goblin and a devil passed in front of my door from the right side of the hallway, which was the side where my mom's room was located, towards the left side, which led to my brother's room and the bathroom. My first thought was that it was my imagination, but about 3 seconds later, my brother, whose room is next to mine, said, "Mom, is that something that passed in the hallway?" My mom came out of her room and freaked out. She searched the only place that the end of the hallway was leading to, which was the bathroom, and found nothing. No windows were opened either. I would say that the creature was around 60 to 70 centimeters tall. I'm not sure exactly, but since there was a light switch next to my door, I kinda measured in my mind with the help of that. It didn't have a tail, horns, or wings, its body was skinny or bony, and it was black. It also made no sound and was extremely fast. It happened in a second. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like when something is so fast, you don't actually see it physically moving, but rather you see it standing still in the fraction of a moment before it's gone. Since then, I have not seen this creature again, and I have no idea where it went. It's as if it disappeared into thin air. I have had some other paranormal experiences later in life, like getting bloody scratches in my sleep, but I found out that I move in my sleep, so it can be explained with that, but this, if my brother hadn't seen it, I would have said that it was my imagination, but since he saw it too, there was definitely something there, and I have no other explanation. I heard this story from my friend who used to live in Canada about his experience, which was rather strange and intriguing. It happened to him about 6 years ago. My friend and his high school buddies, altogether 5 of them, decided to take a road trip on motorcycles from his hometown to the city of Quebec. The town where he is from is neither very big nor very small. I've never been to that place, so the details are very vague, and it's not very far from the city either. According to him, it was 20 kilometers from his town. So they decided the date and set off on their ride. They started their journey at about 10 that morning, and the ride should have taken them 12 to 14 hours. For the first part of their journey, they were fine, and everything went just as well. The incident happened when it was around 11 p.m. One of the friends' bikes made some strange noise and was suddenly shut down. According to my friend, after examination, Nothing out of the ordinary was found, but the bike didn't seem to move. If this wasn't strange, the other bikes also started having problems. They couldn't figure out the cause and decided to camp sometimes to let the engines cool down. Quebec was only 6 or 7 kilometers away, and they had a good time catching up. The road beside which they parked the bikes was this highway with crop fields on both sides, and on the left side of the fields, way behind them, was a forest. As they were sitting on their bikes, one of the friends who went near the crops to mind his business suddenly felt as if the earth was shaking, and he felt nauseated and fell down. Upon falling, he looked towards his friends, and they felt it too. They were all confused, and they couldn't understand anything. It was when, suddenly, from behind the forest, 10 to 12 orb-like things launched into the sky. They were all similar in shape and followed each other in the same manner. They rose from the forest and disappeared into the sky. The orbs, according to him, were like oranges caught fire. It happened for quite some time, and then everything stopped. They were all terrified and remained frozen in their places until my friend shouted, and they all quickly got up on their bikes to hurry away. And amazingly, their bikes worked perfectly fine, no issue. They thought nothing and drove as fast as they could until they reached this gas station and finally stopped. They were so terrified that no one spoke to each other for a while. Then they decided to wait until sunrise and then continue their journey. My friend never spoke of this incident to anyone, and only some of his closest ones, including me, know of it. My family has around 360 acres in northern Oklahoma that have been in our family since the land rush. Growing up, the family would meet there for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but as the family expanded, it was quickly outgrown. Nowadays, I'm about the only person that goes there, and I go there regularly to train with my firearms. I went there earlier this year and had an experience that shook me so badly that I haven't spoken about it until recently and will never go back there alone. I arrived around 2 p.m. and set up my targets, but something felt off. I use an electronic headset for hearing protection that also amplifies ambient noise, and I noticed that everything seemed to stop. No wind, no bugs, no birds, nothing. Just complete and total silence, which is very unusual for the area. I run my normal drills, and as the sun starts to set, things get stranger. Odd smells, like a dirty litter box and body odor, started coming around, and I noticed that the coyotes were crossing the field west of me, almost as if they were intentionally avoiding entering the woods nearby. Then, I started hearing interference coming over my headset and what sounded like disembodied voices speaking in an indiscernible language. Now, I'm starting to worry. I start gathering my things, and I hear what sounds like a woman's blood-curdling screams coming from the woods. Around the same time, I got what I can only describe as a nauseating, omnidirectional feeling of being watched, shortly followed by very distinct footsteps trudging through the foliage in the treeline approximately 30 yards from my position. I've been an avid hunter since childhood and am familiar with the noises of the woods, and the cadence of the footsteps was indicative of a large, bipedal creature, oddly human-like. I pull my phone out to take video, and I start scanning the treeline with my flashlight. Standing behind a tree at the edge of the treeline was a tall, black silhouette with spindly limbs and a pale face, looking directly at me. I managed to capture a great still image of it from the video that I will try to find and attach. I quickly grabbed my range bag and made a run towards my truck. I get about 50 yards from the truck, and the light post on our property, that is hooked up to county power and has never turned off in the 20 years I've been going here, suddenly cuts off. Now, I'm blindly running in the direction I believe my truck is in while I hit the unlock button on my fob to find the lights. I get in my truck, speed off, and as I'm watching in the rear view, the light post turns back on. I tend to think of myself as a rational person who doesn't necessarily believe in the woo kind of stuff. Although my mother described me as being sensitive and somewhat gravitating towards energies as a child, I was doing everything I could to rationalize or come up with a reasonable explanation for the things I was experiencing, but I have no explanation. The kind of fear this experience put into me was unlike any kind of fear I'd ever felt. Ghost stories in my country are usually tales that revolve around past myths or creatures. Most of them start with a long time ago or back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, etc. and proceed within a rural village or in a secluded town. But not this one. No, this one happened to my friend just last year in a populated city in 2020. It was night, and we wanted to do some night fishing to surprise the fish, she said. It was a great catch, we were hauling some squid, some tuna, and such. We were really lucky, we even caught some sea urchins as a yummy side dish, she exclaimed, but after that, the food was the least of her worries. Readying up to go home, they heard rumors of armed men going through nearby roads to rob passers-by. Some rebel groups still scour the country, from her aunt. It wasn't much of a problem, They dealt with them commonly and were used to it, as her mother knew that those rebels never stayed too long on those roads because they were still superstitious about having ghosts or creatures on those small stretch of roads, so her mother told her to rest a bit on the beach and wait around till midnight to make sure the rebels wouldn't catch them or would even still be there. And so they went. It was now 1 a.m. in the morning when they went, friend, her mother, driving alone on a little 100cc motorcycle in a quiet stretch of road from the beach to their house. In the mountains. I was sleepy, she said, but once my mother told me to start praying, the call of sleep disappeared. In front of them, 100 meters away and illuminated by a single lamppost, was a large black dog. Red eyes, shining red eyes, fur. Fur black as midnight, and the size? It sat taller than a small jeep. Her mother dealt with creatures like these before, she knew how to get away, the safest way, she says. Just pray and drive away. Yes, we prayed. Hard, both of us, as we approached the beast to pass it to get home. Drive away, however. Well, to this day, I don't know. We tried to drive away. My mother revved the motorcycle and went past the beast. We thought we were safe. Till we stopped, my mother tried to revise it, but it wouldn't start. Suddenly, the beast came closer, slowly walking towards us, red eyes piercing through my back. I knew it was looking at me. I knew because it felt bad. I felt sick and heavy, and I felt death. My mother? Sweating bullets got off the bike and started pulling. I couldn't help her, I was frozen. She pulled through, and suddenly the engine started again. She got on, and we left. I know it may sound unreal. My friend said, but the fear, the sight, and the trauma I felt were all real. An aswang, they call it. Yes, it's real. Never going night fishing again. This is the only time I had a threatening skin-to-skin contact, experience, or encounter. In June of 2019, me and a friend decided with our girlfriends that we were going to go camping. It's the day of, and we're packing our SHT in the car. We finally get all our stuff loaded, get in the car, and put the address on the GPS. We set off on the trip, and after 3 hours of driving and 45 minutes of hearing my friend and his girl argue, we finally arrived. We get out of the car, and me and my friend begin unloading. After getting my stuff, I began getting my girlfriend's stuff. As I was, my friend was asking his girlfriend why she needed 3 bags for a one-night camping trip. She smiled and opened one of them, and it had an ounce of weed, pre-rolls, and other goodies. The other 2 bags had her favorite snacks and clothes. Knowing we had weed, we had to find a place to camp that wasn't near other people. It took until sundown, but we found a perfect spot. We decided that after we got everything taken care of, we would eat hot dogs and smoke a blunt. We started to build a campfire to light the area so we could set up our tents, but we ran out of wood in the immediate area. I said I would go get some, while my friend stayed with the girls. I set off on my journey, and after about 2 minutes, I found some sticks to use. I started picking up sticks, and all of a sudden, I felt someone grab my wrist. I looked up to see a man with a blank expression. For a man, he had surprisingly long fingernails. He was digging them into my wrist while trying to grab my other wrist. I turned my head to not see his face and screamed for help, and my friend shouted a response, saying they were coming. After they shouted, I immediately felt relief in my wrist. I wasn't struggling to keep my arms down, so I turned, and the man wasn't there anymore. I turned and ran as fast as I could, terrified. I met my friends and said we had to leave immediately. I didn't even explain myself. I just wanted to go. We load our stuff up and take the long walk back. We get to the car and load our bags into it. I explained what happened as we were walking back, and it scared them enough to make them want to hustle. When I was a kid, about 11 or 12, I used to walk to and from school, and I would always take a shortcut through the local cemetery. One day after school, I was taking my shortcut through the cemetery as usual, and I tripped and fell. As I went to get up, I saw bare feet in front of me, and I immediately felt very uneasy. I stood up, and when I did, I saw what looked like a woman standing in front of me wearing a white sort of nightgown sort of thing that went down to her knees. She was barefoot, she had long black hair, and she was looking down at her feet. I felt very unsettled by her, kinda like this, I could be in danger. I don't know if that's the best way to describe the feeling I got. It wasn't like a feeling of immediate danger, more of a very careful sort of feeling, if that makes sense. I said hello, and she looked up at me, and that was when I noticed her eyes were blood red and she looked very reptilian with vertical pupils. When she looked at me, it was sort of like she was looking through me. She then spoke and said that I needed to be more careful and that I needed to get home. Then she disappeared. I never saw her again after that, and I have no idea what she was, but somehow I inherently knew that she could have easily hurt or killed me if she wanted to, but she didn't. If any of you have an idea of what she could have been, let me know. Back in 2017, I used to live with my aunt in Minnesota, and while living with her, I worked at the nearby Walgreens, which was about a 35 to 40 minute bike ride from her place. This event happened in October, eerily enough. But one night I worked the closing shift, but we didn't close and left until about 30 to 40 minutes longer than we used to due to lots of work needing to be done. I bike to and from work, so as someone who believes in the paranormal stuff 100%, biking home at night was always an eerie thing to do because my mind would often go wild. Now the route I take to go home is somewhat isolated. I have to go past a park and a lot of wooded areas, and it's barely lit up as there aren't many street lights or houses for most of that route. I had just gotten to the park area, where it was more naturey and woodsy. I was talking to an ex on the phone, who was currently my girlfriend at the time, as a way to ease my nerves on the way home. I had briefly looked down at my phone when I heard a weird, screeching sound, which caused me to look up. To my horror, there was this large, tall, deathly frail-looking humanoid creature that looked very white and pale, almost as if it were sickly. Before I could really get a good look at it, it dropped onto all fours and leapt into the wooded area. Seeing this, I panicked and began to pedal as fast as I could. Meanwhile, I could hear the thing taking chase but remaining hidden in the woods. I could hear branches constantly snapping and leaves crunching. This thing was in pursuit. I got about halfway through the route, to a point where nature stops being trees and woods and opens up into a rolling hill sort of thing, just flat grass but a bunch of hills. As soon as I got to this point, I heard the thing stop chasing me in complete silence. That's when I noticed a very peculiar scent, blueberry pie, which really weirded me out because there are no houses, restaurants, or buildings of any kind around this area, so the scent of a freshly baked blueberry pie, my favorite pie, really seemed sketchy. I paid no attention to it. As to me, it was coming from the distant hills, as if this thing was somehow creating the scent to draw me away from the sidewalk and towards it. So I kept pedaling and eventually made it to where the townhomes were and eventually back home to safety, which is, yes, I did throw my bike into the garage and run inside and up to my bedroom like a freighted child and turn on the light and TV. Now, it doesn't end there. A few days later, Halloween, when I started forgetting about the thing I saw, I spent the day handing out candy for my aunt and watching TV until it was time to retire to the bedroom. Shortly after I had gone to my room, I again heard that weird screeching sound, and for some reason, my idiot self decided to check out the window, which was about 40 to 50 feet away from. The creature standing underneath a few trees was the house, which made me quickly just close the window and shut the blinds. The next day, surprisingly, my aunt asked me if I had heard the sound last night and saw the thing as well. I guess from what she had told me, she had heard the noise and wanted to see what it was, so she took the dog and went into the backyard. She saw the thing standing there, then almost immediately dropped to all fours and leapt away. Now, when it comes to this thing's size, I would say that when I saw it standing on 2 feet, it was about 7 to 8 feet tall. I'm 6 feet, 7 inches tall, so it was quite taller than me. It looked very pale, like it was nothing but skin and bones, yet it moved incredibly fast from the speed it had leapt away and pursued me while I was biking home. I believe I've been encountered by the supernatural multiple times in my life, but none were more obvious than one that happened to me late in the summer of last year. I was on the phone with my girlfriend, and I decided to go outside to stargaze. It was a crystal clear night, and I could see the sky perfectly, so I stayed out there for about an hour. I had heard a few noises coming from the fence row, which was about 60 feet away from me. Plenty of squirrels live in my area, and it was such a small piece of land that no large animal would have walked in there, so despite how scary they were, I decided to ignore them. Later on, I was about to leave when I heard something strange coming from the fence row, where it turns into a wider forest. Boom boom. I again nudged it off until the noise became closer and more audible. Minutes went by, and the indecipherable noise turned into tribal singing accompanied by loud drums. I quickly hung up on my girlfriend and ran inside before whatever the hell was in my woods got any closer. I don't regularly go to church. I believe in God, but I don't believe in people telling you what to believe. But my little sister was a part of a Bible study thing where missionaries from out west talked to them about their experience living on Native American reservations. I did not know that detail, BTW, so there was nothing in my head about Native Americans, and I decided to go to hear about it the next morning. Apparently, these missionaries were staying in a mostly Christian settlement. However, some of the natives have returned to their old tribal religions. She said that they would walk around the village very late in the night, singing and drumming in a manner that they believed would draw in spirits to the village. I don't believe my experience could be that coincidental. About 5 years ago, I was on a ghost hunt at a cemetery in my hometown. It was a small one and hadn't really been visited by researchers because of its location. It's set back off the highway in a rural area of the county. TBH, I didn't know it was there until we went there that first night. We began the investigation with the 5 of us doing an EVP session at the beginning of the graves. I got a small chill and turned around. I only saw it for a split second, but there was a man sitting on the step at the foot of a grave dressed like he was straight out of Greece, even down to the pack of cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve. After that, we split into teams and split up. I and another guy on the team stayed at the bottom while the others went towards the back of the cemetery. We started another EVP session. I started to provoke a response. My exact words were, "I don't care what you say. You could say ooga booga booga for all I care. Just say something, or I will just keep standing here all night." About that time, I saw a shadow in the wooded area rise off the forest floor, form a ball, and shoot back into the woods like a rocket. We didn't pursue the shadow that night because we were unfamiliar with the area. It was pitch black, and we didn't have flashlights. We finished up the night after I got a feeling of dread and started to run to the car. We got away from the area, almost to the car, and started to listen to the EVP recording on one of the devices. The last thing the team members said on the recording was drowned out by a strange voice that said "leave now," almost yelling it into the recorder. So we took our leave for the night. We got back and started to listen to the recorder I had. When I said, "I don't care if you say ooga booga booga," there was a whisper of a voice that said, "ooga booga booga." There were a few more things found in the recorder, but they were unintelligible. The second time I went there, it was with my wife and youngest son. I wanted to see what was in the woods where I saw the shadow ball, so we went during the day. When I went into the woods, I found more graves that seemed to have caved in due to age and tree growth. About 50 or so more that we couldn't see before. I went to the back of the cemetery and sat down to meditate, get a sense of the place, and just kind of feel it out. I didn't have any equipment with me, but I decided to try and talk to whatever was there that first night and see if it could manifest or move something. Well, this is where it got weird and creepy. I saw a manifestation, alright, but it was more like a man who had golden skin, was wearing a loincloth, and had the head of a bull. Just like the Minotaur from the Daedalus story in Greek mythology. I have never seen or heard of anything else like this happening. He told me, "Get out. This is my place." So I stood up, and we left, and I haven't been back since. Has anyone else ever seen or heard of this? I live in a remote area off the side of Highway 69 here in northern Ontario. Wooded forest. Swampy marshes are here and there. Winter time. Snowy, forget time. And date. I and my girlfriend at the time were at her place alone for the night. Hung out, watched a movie, etc. We were going to sleep when we started to hear the dog outside whimpering. Now this little dog barks like a damn maniac at anyone or anything coming close to the driveway. The house was the last one on a long dirt road that leads further on to the Greek Bay. Mind you, we are only like 600 meters from the highway if that. Just some insight. Anyway, after a few moments of the dog whimpering, we hear something start to slowly come up the front stairs. The type of stairs that go up the side of a house and directly to the door. These stairs passed by the living room window. It sounded like a bipedal thing slowly stepping up each step with a loud thud that seemed to slightly shake the porch, house, or something. Like, really aggressive coming up, but still slow in content. While this was happening, I was asking my girlfriend if she knew who it could be. A drunk neighbor, maybe. She said she didn't know. We were super freaked at this time. We were already freaked at the dog whimpering. The amount of fear I had was overwhelming. From the sound this thing made, it sounded large. The thing got to the front door, which was very close to her bedroom door. And he made a huge bang or thud on the door. Not in a knocking manner, the knock kind of shakes the side of the building. It did this about 7 times, each with the same effort. We freaked as shit in laying there. While this was happening, you could just feel it was bad. The thing walked back down the steps the same way it came up, and we lay there forever waiting for something else, like a window tap or something. We freaked right out the whole time. We got up and went to check the front living room window. The dog wasn't whimpering but was still hiding in his doghouse at the bottom of the stairs. The light on the porch was on, and we saw no footprints. None in the driveway, none up the road towards neighbors. And highway. It creeps me out thinking about that time. It just came up the stairs and banged on the door real hard about 7 times, walked back down the steps, and left, I guess. The presence gave off bad vibes and was creepy and overwhelming. I know it couldn't have been a person, that's all I know. Anyone know what it may have been? My cousin, who's like 21 years old, recently told me a story about the time he and his friend saw what they believed to be giants. They were out driving around the back roads of Wisconsin on some dirt roads through the forest. When they hit a sandy clearing, they stopped for a moment. His buddy suddenly kind of freaks out and points out on the other side of the clearing. It's a really wide clearing. He said it was about 150 to 200 feet, and says something along the lines of, "Hey dude, what the hell is that?" So my cousin looked out across the field where he was pointing and saw two large creatures. The way he explained them to me was that they were at least 12 feet tall. He could tell because they were just at the edge of the tree line and were almost half the height of these full-grown trees. He couldn't determine whether or not they were covered in hair, just that they were a pretty dark tan color. He said that, in his opinion, it looked like skin, but again, he was so far away that he didn't know for sure. Before he could see their faces, they started booking it back into the woods. They were running so fast, they were gone in moments. Personally, I believe him because he has told me the story a handful of times, and every time the details were exactly the same. Obviously, I asked him if he was impaired, and he claimed his friend had a couple beers, but he was sober. He believes it was giants, and my dad made the point that they could have been aliens. I'm not sure what to believe they could have been, all I know is that I believe he saw what he saw. There was something weird out in the woods that day. What do you guys think? Last year, during the fall, I went camping in Pilot Knoll Park. I went to bed at around 11:30 and woke up about 2 hours later, at 2:25, because I had to go to the bathroom. On my way back, I heard a noise and looked around. I saw a creature squatting on a tree branch. From the quick glimpse I saw, it had reddish eyes and was a dark color. I was so scared that I ran back to my tent and stayed still until I fell asleep. When I woke up, I and my friends packed up and left. I have seen it twice after the experience, once in the forest near my home, where it was standing in the distance. I saw it upright with its head hunched over, and once more at Pilot Knoll, where I noticed it had 2 claws on each hand and foot. My friend claims that he saw it once when hunting, where he claimed it hung out around his truck. He says he saw 2 thin things protruding from the top of its head. Me and my friends started calling it the Red-Eyed Man and also the Knoll Man. That's all I have seen of this thing and all I know. I don't know if it has feathers, fur, or scales. I don't know if it has sharp teeth or flat teeth. If you know about the Knoll Man or have seen it, I am very interested in your story. I live in the bush of Australia, Queensland, with big gum trees and a lot of nature. I have lived in an old Queenslander house in the bush ever since I was little. I never had any bad experiences with demons or creatures growing up in the house until one night me and my friend decided we were going to go for a late night walk in the bush behind the house. Everything was good, and we were just talking and having fun until we started walking into the forest behind a big shed my dad built. We only got a few steps in, and we heard a loud noise come from the forest. In the corner of my eye, standing next to the tree, I saw a white, tall creature. It looked to have goat feet and was very tall. I didn't look for another second. I turned and started running. Part of me wishes I saw its face. But I was so scared I had to run, and so was my friend, who also saw it. Years later brings me to today, where I currently live in the shed we went behind and saw the creature at. The forest is right at my back door. Today, me and my boyfriend cooked dinner and sat outside. I heard me scream, and then I heard my name. Loud and clear. It sounded like a female yelling, but something was wrong. It didn't sound human. I freaked out, dropped my food, and ran inside. My boyfriend stood out there confused and had to listen and hear it for himself. It said it loudly again, my name. He ran inside, closed the door, and locked it. I was so scared that I had to grab my car keys and leave. Pulling out of the car garage, I looked up to where we were sitting when we heard the noise and saw a figure again. This time it was moving, so I couldn't see it clearly. We drove away and stayed somewhere else for the night. What could this creature be? It feels to me like I have an evil presence. And say my name in such a loud, clear voice. It sounded like a fox could speak English. What is it? What can I do to either get rid of it or make peace with it? So a few years ago, the night sky was clear, and my mom and I had gotten off work at about the same time. About 2 to 3 a.m. the moon looked beautiful. We decided to go watch the sunrise over the lake. We lived about 15 minutes from Lake Michigan, and it was pretty regular for us to talk for hours. We took a back road through a wooded area to get to our usual location. Some information you need to know about the location in order to imagine this. The road we took was a very small one that had thick woods and swamps on both sides. This road is so small that if cars were going both ways, sometimes you had to pull off slightly to the side to let the other car pass. Lots of greenery surrounds this road, and there are slight dips on either side. No streetlights or anything. So the only illumination is the car's headlights. Okay, so we're driving and chatting, and I'm in passenger, mom's driving. As she's talking to me, I'm looking at her, and she's looking at the road. She stopped mid-sentence, and I could tell that something was happening in front of us, so I glanced over. I said, "What's a kid doing out here this late?" I saw what I can only describe as a creature that looked like it was made to blend in with its surroundings and was standing on the left side of the road. It seemed to be made of twigs, leaves, and branches, almost, but not quite, resembling a tumbleweed. It stood at most 3 feet tall. It seemed to be covered in patches of some sort of orange, copper, or red fur, but not quite fur. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized, that's not a kid. My mom shouted my thoughts and slammed on the brakes. If you've ever seen TV shows depicting the way vampires move, like super fast, almost glitching across, that's how this thing moved to get in front of us. It was on the left, then right in front of us in a split second. If I had to guess, we were maybe 7 feet away from it. It lifted its head, its whole body was kind of one big mass, and it looked at us with its eye. Yes, that's correct. One eye, one completely black eye. We sat there in stunned silence for a moment. Just as I was asking, "What is that?" it got down and slithered, like a ducking snake, past the car and into the brush on my side. My mom took off at full speed. I had researched a lot about how one person's thoughts and recollection of a situation can influence another person's until the story is no longer the same. There was even a study done about people who had never been on a hot air balloon being shown a picture of one, being told that they were on it when the photo was taken, and being asked to remember the day. Most people said that they remembered it and made up a story about it. Really interesting stuff, absolutely worth looking into. So, knowing this prior to the event, I asked her what she saw, and she asked me what I saw. Both were the same. At first, we tried to rationalize it as a tumbleweed, but no, it surely looked at us. Maybe a deformed animal? But no animal around here looks like tumbleweed. Maybe a really skinny, deformed fox? It couldn't be, as it glitches across the road. That's the only way I know how to describe it. We then moved on to more paranormal creatures in our search engines. This proved fruitless, as nothing we could find matched the description of what we saw. When telling this story to friends, I often find myself referring to it as a realistic and nightmarish version of the Lorax. To this day, when recalling this incident, it feels like we saw something we weren't supposed to. We saw past what we all know as fact, real, and tangible, and we saw a part of what this world really is. This feeling doesn't make sense. This is my encounter with something I truly can't explain. It happened when I was in early middle school. I remember the night vividly because I was truly, undeniably afraid. It was late at night, 15 years ago. My friends and I were walking down Main Street, past the neighborhood cemetery, Evergreen. None of our parents had a clue. They thought we were safe at our friend's house. Her parents were away, so it was a prime sleepover location and a great opportunity to adventure after dark, like the rebels we clearly were. As we were walking and talking, my friend Marissa stopped and yelled, "Did you guys see that?" We had no idea what she was talking about. It was a light, and it flew through the cemetery. "Tell me you guys saw it." After some debate, my best friend of the group, Casey, looked at me, cocked her head, and waggled her eyebrows. Her and I were known to be the more daring types in our grade, which was hilarious because we were only 11 years old. We weren't bullies or anything, though Casey's rough and tough attitude often left people intimidated. We just never turned down a challenge. She and I dashed across the street and up the hill. We strolled deeper into the cemetery, remaining on the narrow, designated footpath riddled with weeds protruding through stone crevices. We weaved through rows, glancing at graves, unable to read their occupants' names. We neared the edge of the graveyard and put an end to our venture, having seen nothing but a whole bunch of darkness. Casey stopped, took one last survey of her surroundings, and said, "There's nothing here. Let's just go." She started back the way we came. I sighed, half disappointed. I wouldn't say I believe in ghosts, but I'm pretty open-minded. If someone gave me hard proof, I'd still be skeptical. I'm the kind of person who needs to witness it for herself. I guess I hope to see something. As I turned, ready to follow my best friend away from this way too black darkness, something caught the corner of my eye. It was a light coming from the woods. I whipped around, and my feet set like concrete. Every ounce of blood seeped from my body, and my lungs deflated. Between two trees stood, floated, a figure, a woman in a white dress, only the woman herself was also as white as snow, with a soft white glow surrounding her. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders. She wasn't moving. I couldn't even see a face. Casey could see it too. As quickly as she came, the woman disappeared, as if someone had flicked off a light switch. The glow vanished, leaving Casey and me in a darkness that seemed darker than before. We bolted out of there, neither of us saying a word. I ran so fast, I nearly tumbled down the hill. With a strong desire to flee, I wouldn't have been against it. It would have gotten me to the bottom a lot quicker, albeit with scrapes and bruises. I would have taken the chance. When we made it back to our friends, we told them what we saw: a woman as white as snow, wearing a white dress, glowing white. Marissa replied, "The light I saw was yellow, not white." Neither Sarah nor Marissa believed us. Casey and I defended our case, and the argument went on until we reached Sarah's house. By the end of it, Sarah and Marissa still weren't convinced, though Marissa went on about the light she swore she saw. To be completely honest, Casey and I started to doubt what we witnessed. Eventually, our experience morphed into tricks of the eyes from internalized paranoia and fear. We couldn't even tell our parents since they didn't know we were walking around town at night, and we had no intention of ratting ourselves out. Casey and I stopped talking about it, and soon, the memory faded. Flash forward 3 years. We were in high school. On a Saturday, I was with my other friend, Marissa, a different person than earlier, note the extras, loitering at the local ice cream shop, as most locals did. We sat at an outside table, talking. After a while of some catching up, she says, "My friend told me this creepy story the other day. Want to hear it?" As a huge fan of horror, I told her to go for it. She shifted in her seat to face me, eyes wide. "It's about Evergreen. The cemetery?" My friend said it's haunted. The stories date back decades. Can you believe that? When the words left her lips, my spine straightened. I felt every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't want to believe her, so I immediately dismissed the issue. That's when she took a deep breath and said, "It's true. A woman appears in the woods at the far end of the cemetery, usually between those two really big trees. They call her the woman in white." So my grandparents used to own this lake house in northern Ontario, Canada. My parents recall the light flickers, the sounds of footsteps and movement at night, our dog always avoiding the basement, and that one night the wood stove lit on its own. I personally think that could have just been an old ember. Regardless, there were odd things that would happen in this house. My grandfather remembers one night in which my grandmother was at work. He had heard footsteps come from the top of the hall, towards his room, and then right to the bed beside where he was trying to sleep. He was too scared to open his eyes. However, my experience has been stuck in my head since it happened. My family and I were visiting during the summer when I was around 12 years old. I had gone downstairs to get a drink out of the fridge. But when I had made it to the landing and entered the rec room, there was a man to my right, a tall, pale man with a three-piece suit and dark black hair. The man stared at me and then yelled. I then immediately ran up the stairs, and I was so scared that I didn't tell anyone. For a long time. Fast forward about 15 years, my grandparents have long left that house and were visiting my parents and me at camp. They had brought up the lake house, and I then told them all my encounters. My grandmother was completely shocked and very curious. It turns out that she had seen the same figure, but in a beige suit, on the porch one morning. The figure moved to the side of the house and then disappeared. It was damn spooky, that's for sure. This story takes place in southern Illinois, near an old campground about 3 or 5 miles north of the city of Mount Vernon. I was about 19, I'd say, so that puts this about 8 or 9 years ago. It was also fall, I believe it was early October. I was younger, and I was definitely a lot more ignorant of danger back then. I always kept a fire poker in my trunk when I'd go into the woods because, well, I'd been attacked by a turkey before and just barely got a stick between me and it before I scared it off. It was a little embarrassing, but I needed to preface this with as much information as I could so I could get some accurate feedback on what happened. It was about 10:30 p.m., and I had made up my mind that I didn't want to see anyone for the whole evening. I had a pretty bad breakup, and I was very upset. Nature always made me feel better, so I decided to go to an old campsite to, well, conquer my demons, so to speak. I typically never do this kind of thing, but I wasn't thinking about much other than my angst. I did have the presence of mind to bring a knife and a coat my grandmother gave me, so at least I had some protection from the elements. I didn't have a light, so I used my phone's terrible flashlight. It got the job done, so I wasn't upset. So I walked into the driveway for this campground and snuck my way past the gate without any cars seeing me. It wasn't far from the campsite, but there were small hills blocking the view on either side, so all I could really see were the trunks of some small trees in the dark. This camp had an old rumor. On certain nights, a white lady would haunt the edges of the woods at midnight. I figured, why not squat a bit and see if it were true? I checked around the camp and made sure there was nobody else here, then opened one of the cabins and sat for a while. Before I knew it, it had started to rain. And I mean, rain hard. I could barely see outside to begin with, but now it was impossible. Thankfully, there was a light that came on from the large barn at the entrance of the camp. By the time the rain had stopped, it was midnight. I looked outside, and sure enough, there was no white lady. I'll admit, at the time, I was disappointed. It didn't last, though. After I sighed and walked out into the now light drizzle of rain, I was just lost in thought, wondering what to do next. Now I don't know how many of you have ever felt the total stillness of the woods, but those of you who know it are dreadful, unlike many others. Your body gets cold, your hair stands on end, and you feel a crippling fear begin to seize you, screaming to run. I felt that. I felt it immediately, though I couldn't figure out why. I felt eyes on me. I knew I had to run, but one thought kept screaming in my ear. If you run, it won't be like that. I knew it was true in my soul. But I knew I couldn't stand here either. I did the only thing that I knew to do at that time. I ripped my poker out, brandished my knife in the other hand, and screamed. Now it was more of a shrill, I'm terrified kind of scream. Not one I had ever heard come out of my throat. But I was shaking and ready to fight or run the hell out. Thinking back, probably the latter. That fear became a reality, though. Behind the concessions building, I heard something that honestly haunts me. It was no animal. It wasn't anything indigenous. Whatever was watching me was standing on the building, dropped behind view, and ran on 2 feet at a very fast pace. Whatever it was in the woods between me and my car. Worse yet, I realized that if it had followed me, it may have been from the light, because I tried to stay in the light as much as I could. And my phone was basically a beacon to me. I admit, I was in tears from fear. I know it isn't manly, but I was SHT scared. Because I knew I had to walk in that dark all the way back to my car, or it would get bold and come back. It took me half an hour to make it back to a 5-minute walk, but I made it. I could barely stop myself from shaking as I made sure my car was clear and the area was clear. I didn't see anything else. I heard nothing else. I wish I had more to give, but that's where my story ends. I went back a few times, but it was totally clear. I'm from England, and I practically grew up in the local forest. My best friend lived in the middle of the forest, and through the summer, we'd spend every day, from breakfast until dark, wandering the forest. We spent a lot of time ignoring the trails and walking along the shallow streams. When I was out of high school, I took my now ex-boyfriend and 2 terriers into the forest. We decided to wander the streams and climb the small waterfalls like I did as a kid and teen. We were out there for most of the day, and it was about an hour from sunset, time to start heading home. My ex was a country guy, he grew up in the forest like me, spent most of his summers camping, and so on. We were both very familiar with forests, what to expect, how to navigate them, etc. So we climbed up a small waterfall, and there was a bridge about 100 feet further down the stream. A large, very clear bridge with red brick. The banks on either side of the stream were steep but climbable. The dogs were both happy, running around, there were no problems there. So we started climbing up the bank to get a better feel for where we were and to see about heading back home. I'm not sure why it took us so long, but we were about halfway up the bank when we noticed the ground was covered in spiders. The entire bank was just covered in thousands of small black spiders. We paused to look around and noticed that all of the trees were dead or dying, which was strange given how vibrant and green the rest of the forest had been. When we really listened, we also noticed that it was silent. Absolute silence. That was when the feeling of being watched dawned on us, and the dogs stopped roaming and stayed close. We acted casually, reached the top of the bank, and concluded that the broad, muddy path heading away from the bridge was the right direction to get home. There was a dark patch of forest on the other side of that path. The trees weren't the same as the tall pines and rhododendron patches throughout the rest of the forest. They were densely packed and spindly, and you couldn't see more than 5 feet into that area. I haven't seen a patch of forest like that before or since. At this point, we were acutely aware of something dark and malevolent watching us from those woods. We couldn't see it, but everything was screaming at me to run and never look back. We put the dogs on their leads for their safety. Now, the laces on my walking boots had remained perfectly fine for the entire day, which was a good 7 hours long at that point. As we walked along that muddy path, with the presence staring at us from the dark woods, my laces kept untying every few steps. It didn't matter how tight I did the knots or how many knots I used, they kept untying. We didn't say a word until we were far away from that area. It turned out it was about 30 minutes from a friend's house. We passed her house on the way back home, who I'd visited many times over the years and roamed the forest around that area without seeing that creepy patch of woods before. We talked about it in the car, and both felt the malevolent presence and agreed that had we been stuck there after dark, something very bad would have happened. We didn't know what the thing was, we hadn't seen anything, but there was no doubt in our minds that it wanted us to be there after dark. And we wouldn't have survived that night. Fast forward 5 or 6 months. I was walking the dogs through the forest by myself. I hadn't been paying much attention to the trails I was wandering down, I had all day, and the dogs had lots of energy to burn off. I came across a broad red brick bridge. Pausing in the middle of it, I looked down the stream and recognized it as the stream we'd walked up. That location had been burned into my mind, and I am absolutely sure it was the same bridge I'd seen when we walked up the stream. I braced myself for those dark woods as I meandered down the same mud track that had been there. I was curious to see if I got the same feeling from it and if the spiders were still there. The dark patch of wood wasn't there. No spiders. No dark woods. No trace of it had ever been there. I stopped and looked around for a good 15 minutes, going back and forth and confirming small landmarks. Everything was there except those dark woods with the malevolent presence. I saw a white heart earlier on that second walk, which is the first and last time I've ever seen one. I don't know if that's related or not. I've never been back that way. Anyone have any ideas? My thought was Fae, but I haven't read anything about spiders relating to the Fae. The haunting. My friend and I went up a mountain trail in our town on July 6, 2023. We went to the normal trail parking lot. Took the main trail, then veered off onto a smaller trail to the right. We wanted to get to the little hill on the right that looked over the town. On the way there, we were already deciding when we were going to come back because it was so beautiful, and we were just in awe. We get to the top of the little hill, eat some McDonald's, and talk for like an hour or two. It's starting to get dark, so we start to pack up to leave before it gets dark. When we were leaving, we were originally playing music. About 20 seconds in, I decided to stop the music because I thought I could hear someone talking, a man, but assumed it was the music. After the music stopped, I kept hearing someone talking. My friend and I are almost completely silent, walking at a fast pace together. It was unspoken, but you could feel the tension and that something wasn't right. My friend is in front, and I am behind. After a bit, I start to get the feeling that someone's behind me, specifically to my right. I was too scared to see what was behind me. At some point, my friend stops abruptly and looks to her right. She seems scared of something, almost as if someone has grabbed her shoulder, but I was in panic mode and could tell she was too, and so I said, "Go, keep going," so she starts walking even faster with me right behind. The trail is small. About 5 to 10 seconds later, I hear the voices again, and I ask my friend, "Do you hear that?" Again. No less than a few seconds later, my right ear starts ringing really loudly, and I hear a very vivid and loud "Hear me" in a man's voice. I flipped my shit. I tell my friend to walk faster, and we bolted to my car. The trail we took was only an 8 to 10 minute walk normally, and we were walking fast and running, so it took a lot less time for all of that to go down. We get into my car, and after a few seconds of silence, we both say something along the lines of "what the duck/hell/shit," and we both talk about what we felt. Both of us heard voices but assumed it was the music or something. The voices seemed close enough that we should have been able to see the person, but we couldn't. Both of us felt something very heavy to our right. Hence my friend looking to her right, me feeling something to my right, and my right ear ringing. We both agreed we weren't alone, and that was creepy as hell. Both of us were shaking for, like, an hour after that because of the adrenaline. We have not gone back. I called my close friend to tell her what happened, and I knew she was spiritual. She told me I needed to call her mom as soon as possible. I did. I explained everything to her mom, who started to do some research. She finds out that the exact spot that we were walking in used to be a Native American tribe's homeland before they were forcefully removed by settlers. Which we think is why they just wanted to be heard. They were hurting from being displaced from their home and just wanted someone to hear them. I have never had an experience like that before, and it definitely made me believe more in the paranormal because, wow. So back in 2014 or 2015, my dad, uncle, and I went on a trip together to Alberta, Canada. It was an annual trip that my dad and I went on, and we decided to ask my uncle to come along. At the time, my uncle was struggling with emotional stuff, and we thought being with nature would help him. We are First Nations people, and we believe the mountains are very powerful for healing. It was sort of like a healing journey for him. Anyway, we stopped at this lake between Banff and Jasper. I forgot which lake, but it was just off of the 93 highway. Beautiful lake, The 93 highway goes along the right side of the lake and curves left. From the campsite, you could see the other part of the road from across the lake. We set up camp, and I decided to go explore the surrounding area. I went to the lake to admire how blue it was. It never ceases to amaze me. Then I went along the shore and saw this gazebo near the parking lot. It had a fireplace and picnic tables inside. It was pretty open, you could feel the breeze inside there. It was lightly raining, and I decided to go in there and sit at the picnic tables. My uncle walked in, and he went to the other corner of the gazebo to sit at another table. It wasn't unusual, he's a quiet man and likes to keep to himself, as do I. My dad came in shortly after, sat beside him, and started talking about something. I can't remember what it was because it didn't involve me, and I didn't want to be in their business. There was a lull in their conversation, and out of nowhere, my uncle said to us, "Did you guys see that?" I look up, and he's looking at both of us with this weird expression. It wasn't fear or anything, just a what the duck kind of look. My dad said no, and I nodded no. He explained that he saw a yellow ball of light, and it was really fast. He said it was on the other side of the entrance wall but went up towards the roof. Just to clarify, this gazebo type thing had 3 walls. On the back wall was the iron stove fireplace, and the side walls had windows. The front entrance had half walls, and it had no door. It almost looked like a cabin. My dad and I both looked at each other, and he had a look in his eye that said he didn't believe him. I didn't either. Then a few minutes passed, and I saw my dad twitch in the corner of my eye, and he looked around him. He spoke to my uncle and said, "You saw that too, right?" It was fast, but it had a yellow light, and my uncle agreed with him. At this point, I thought they were going crazy, like there was no way a yellow light was zooming around here. Then, a few moments later, I saw it too. It came around the corner through the front entrance and went above my uncle's head, did maybe 2 or 3 circles around him, and then went to my dad, went around him once, then went to me. But before it got to me, it made a sharp 90-degree turn towards the roof and went through a gap between the roof and the wall. This all happened in a matter of seconds, 1 second, maybe 2 seconds. It was really, really fast. It passed in front of my eyes, and I swear I saw little butterfly wings within that glowing light, like when you go by something fast and can make out vague details of an object but not fully, if that makes sense. I could have imagined the wings, but no way. I imagined the ball of light. We all saw the ball of light. I went through many possible explanations, like a moth, but it was too big to be a moth, and moths are pretty slow compared to the ball of light. Then I thought it was a bird, because I know how fast birds can be, but to fly like that, it would be impossible for birds. Making those sharp turns. Plus, it made no noise when it flew. No flapping of wings, just the rain hitting the roof. Then I thought about balls of lightning. Some reports said they could be blue, yellow, or orange. I'm pretty sure. But it is said that it leaves a smell of sulfur, and I didn't smell anything, plus they are extremely rare. It was raining, but there wasn't any lightning. It could have been a hallucination we all experienced at the same time, which I highly doubt. It was a very interesting experience, whether we hallucinated it or not, but after it happened, my uncle did seem to smile more on the trip and seemed less gloomy. Did this happen to anyone else? Or do you see something like this? So, a few things before I start. I have no idea what I encountered. I haven't obsessively researched the ever-loving snot out of this because, honestly, I'm scared shitless. But I believe I saw an SW, I read that speaking its name summons it, and considering I still live in the house where I saw it, I'm not taking any chances. Well, technically, I saw its eyes. My name's Cass, and I'm 26. I live in an older home. I'm still determining how old, to be exact. I have yet to research the history of the place. This entire experience has undoubtedly accelerated this plan. I bought it from some old dude and called it a day. Which, in hindsight, was a stupid-ass decision. But I can't change the past. Anyway, the house was made for short people, which is what I'm trying to say. I have to duck down to enter or leave rooms. My house is also on a hill, so half is on a foundation. My bedroom window is about 7 feet from the ground. I have to lift myself to see into my room. Sorry if this entire section is monotonous to read. I swear, this is all pertinent information. I also have these big bay windows in my living room that look out into the forest I live in. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but oh well. Alright, I think I got everything. Let's go ahead and get on with the story. So, I moved into my home during an especially rough period in my life, so I didn't do a lot of research when initially buying the house. I love nature. I've always found peace whenever I was camping, hiking, or whatever outdoorsy shenanigans I would get up to. I figured moving to a cabin-esque house in the middle of butt-duck nowhere was the best thing I could do at the time, and, you know what? It was great. I spent a lot of time outside, familiarizing myself with the trails and stuff. During the day, the forest was alive, chirping birds, insects, you name it. At night, it was quiet, but you'd still hear the odd animal call. It was exactly what I needed. Another thing that did take a little getting used to was finding an animal's leftovers while on a hike. I'd stumble upon a rotting carcass and have to take a moment to shake the initial shock off. Nature is scary, man. I don't have a lot of big predators wandering through my neck of the woods, but I get the odd bear or cougar. However, one time I was out on a hike, I wasn't too far from my house, maybe a half-hour walk, and came across one of the most grotesque sights I had ever seen. I have seen my fair share of animal carcasses, but this was something else. This animal was ripped to shreds. I won't go into too much detail, but whatever this thing was, its body parts were strewn over a 10, maybe 15-foot radius. It was horrifying. I also couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I left that place in a hurry. I also avoided the area like that plague because another thing I noticed was how dead silent the forest seemed. It was eerie. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and that feeling of being watched returned. But this time, I was sitting in my living room. I didn't have curtains for my big bay windows, and being in the middle of nowhere, I didn't worry about people spying on me while watching TV. I also found the darkness relaxing, creepy but relaxing. On top of feeling like someone was really eyeing me up, not seductively, either, more like I was dinner, I started hearing weird noises at night. I live in a remote area in central BC, British Columbia, Canada. We heard some bizarre animal sounds here. But nothing compared to what I was hearing. To describe the sound, for anyone who's played the game or watched the show The Last of Us, you know the sound the clickers make? It was similar to that, but more growly and guttural. I don't know if that makes sense. But it's the best way I can describe it. I started finding more animal remains closer to my house, which made me nervous. I thought a grizzly had made this area its turf, which isn't good. Grizzlies are mean bastards and very dangerous. So, I decided to cut back on the number of hikes I did during the day, and on the odd hike I did, I was hypervigilant, always looking for the apparent signs of a bear, large tracks, feces, claw marks on trees, etc., but I wasn't seeing any signs. There was nothing to indicate a large predator was skulking around my house. Cut to the night of March 21st. My bedroom was a little toasty, and I was like a damn furnace. So I had my bedroom window open. I have a screen thingy that keeps bugs out, to let the cool breeze in. It was around 1 or maybe 2 a.m. when I started to get this horrible sinking feeling. I can't quite describe it other than that my entire body was telling me to run. I started hearing the clicking sound again, and I just figured a big animal was walking in my yard, hence my unease. I kept waiting to hear footsteps or the crunching of twigs, just anything. But nothing. That's also when I noticed how damn silent the forest was, just like when I stumbled across those remains. I opened my eyes and turned my lamp on. I was going to get up and get some water. While my eyes were adjusting to the light, I saw something in my window. Remember, that crap is 7 feet off the ground. So, imagine my surprise when I saw 2 duck-normous eyeballs staring at me. I'm assuming you're familiar with the whole fight or flight response humans have, right? You either punch a BTCH or run in the opposite direction. Well, I'm a runner, but at this moment, I was paralyzed with fear. I've never felt anything like it. But after staring into the lovely eyes of my peeping Tom, I finally got my feet under me, and I ran out of my room like a bat out of hell. Or I tried to. In my panic, I forgot to duck and absolutely got my SHT rocked on the ducking door frame. I fell flat on my ass, but since I was still in panic mode, I flipped onto my stomach and did this weird, half flailing like a fish, half army crawl to my bathroom, which was directly across the hall from my bedroom. I got in and slammed and locked the door behind me. Duck, I know I wrote that entire section in a rather humorous way, but I was so damn scared at that moment. I had a nasty headache from slamming my head into the door frame and was hyperventilating. Worse still, I left my ducking phone in the room. There was no way in hell I was about to march my ass back into my room with a mutated crackhead playing Peeping Tom. So, I sat in that bathroom. I moved over to the bathtub, where I somehow fell asleep in the fetal position. It took a lot of courage for me to leave that bathroom when I woke up. I think I was asleep for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and you can't imagine the relief I felt when I saw daylight. Once I confirmed the mutated crackhead was gone, I grabbed my keys and phone, ran out of my house in nothing but my undies, and drove my ass all the way to my brother's house, who lives about 4 hours away, mind you. I showed up on his doorstep early in the morning in my boxers, sporting a massive goose egg on my forehead and raving like a lunatic about big eyes in my window. After he calmed me down and got me into some clothes, I was able to tell him everything. He obviously didn't believe me. Hell, I don't even believe what I saw. All I know is that it scared the living shit out of me. In lighter news, my duckhead brother convinced me to see a doctor for my head. I had a mild concussion, to which he promptly started calling me unicorn. The goose egg was dead center on my ducking forehead. I ended up returning home after a month of staying away. My brother and his wife were okay with me staying, especially since whatever I saw rattled me. But they were expecting their first child pretty soon, and it felt wrong to hang around. I can tell you that I inspected the house and the surrounding area for anything. There was nothing, no tracks, no animal feces, nada. Also, there are no trees close to my window. So for anyone thinking, it was probably an owl, you dussy, sorry to burst your bubble.